You don't need to be a chemist to understand what's going on in the next phase. This here is a closely trimmed fingerboard with gold-plated contacts. Underneath these gold-plated contacts is usually a bit of copper and a bit of nickel. The goal here is to make a batch of acid peroxide, which then turns into copper chloride 2, which will not attack the gold, but it will attack the copper and the nickel under the gold, which will allow these gold foils to float around, eventually sinking to the bottom of the 5-gallon bucket. The acid peroxide, which then becomes copper chloride 2, will not attack the gold, nor will it attack the circuit board. It will attack what's under the gold, which is namely copper and probably a nickel strike. The upside to acid peroxide is that it's fairly cheap, fairly and relatively safe, and it works great. The downside is it probably takes about a week with an occasional rinse and tending to the bucket. Once again, the goal is to remove the metal underneath these gold-plated contacts to loosen them so they float around. In about a week, this will look like this. What I plan on doing today is taking 212 grams of neatly cut fingers, putting them in this pool strainer with a plastic hose for dipping into an acid peroxide bath. I'm going to make fresh acid peroxide, and I'm going to put these in the pool strainer for about a week, along with a batch of boards, which will be coming up in the next portion of this video. Here is the pool strainer with 212 grams of neatly cut edge connectors. There might be an intruder in there of something else, but by and large, they're mostly edge connectors. This is my air bubbler setup. Quite simple to make. I bought this on Amazon for maybe $10. It's got two outputs, A and B. I'm using them both. What I did was I put a drop of super glue around the outside of the port and press the hose on to make sure it doesn't blow out during the acid peroxide process. So these are going to be secured in there pretty well. As I said in a previous video, I get one season out of these air bubblers because of the acid fumes eventually let the ghost out of this particular device. So I got two outputs, two separate hoses. I configured some adapters here to make the diameters right. I have two long PVC tubes that go into the bottom of the bucket. Very important to have these hard tubes because the bubbles, the air will stay at the bottom of the bucket and rise up. I just happen to have two, but one will be just fine. So sharing an afternoon copper chloride tube bath with the 212 grams of gold fingers will be these 25 boards fully prepared for the acid peroxide process. These boards, as you can see, have been fully depopulated and the solder is gone and the solder mask is flaking off. The gold is untouched. So I just picked 5 groups of 5, which is 25 boards, and we'll put them in the bucket dry to see if they fit. I also, prior to the process, drilled small holes in the corners or in various places so that I can put these tubes through it and hang them in the side of the bucket to make the whole dunking process and removal process easier. So I'm going to stop the video. I am going to make 5 groups of 5 and then we'll pick it up where we left off. So I have prepared 5 groups of 5 highly plated with hopefully thick gold-plated circuit boards ready for an afternoon dunk in the tank. What I also did was at the end of each hose, I put a small loop because later on in the process, I'm going to hang them over the acid bucket on a hook so they drain into the bucket. It just makes the whole process easier. And if you can learn a trick or two from me, great. So I put a loop. They're about 2 to 3 feet long. And let's put them in the bucket for a test run. So here is the dry run of the acid peroxide process. I've got this pool strainer with 212 grams of cleanly cut fingers, and then I have 25 highly plated circuit boards surrounding it, and probably 2 to 3 gallons of HCl should cover everything. What's important to note that over time, the copper, which is going to be dissolved underneath the gold foils, will eventually saturate the AP. And that presents a little bit of a headache because you got to remove a lot of the AP, filter it, and then replenish it with more hydrochloric acid. But for now, we're going to use 2 gallons of HCl, and then we're going to add 100 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide and the bubblers, and then we'll see you in a week. So I am about to begin the acid peroxide process, also known as AP. AP is a misnomer. The hydrochloric acid nor the hydrogen peroxide is enough to dissolve the copper underneath the gold foils. But together, they start a process that becomes copper chloride 2, which etches the copper below the foils and releases the foils. So here is my setup. Stock pot in orange. There's a little bit at the bottom there. And then here is the new batch. I've got 212 grams of gold fingers, very nicely and trimmed. And then I've got 25 circuit boards, each with their own pull string. I've got 2 gallons of muriatic acid, also known as hydrochloric acid. And then I'm going to add 100 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide to kickstart the reaction. And then I'll put the bubbler sticks in there at the end. I'm not going to show you how I pour the hydrochloric acid in. I want to have 2 hands and have my sense of awareness. But basically, I don't pour the whole gallon at once because the fumes rise up pretty fast. I'll probably make 4 pours per gallon. And then we'll come back and take a look at it. So here's the AP setup. Ideally, you want to cover all the boards with the AP solution. And I'm a little shy with 2 gallons. So I'm going to pick up another gallon and dump it in there tomorrow. But the show must go on. We're going to start this process right now. You can see I got the bubbler sticks in there. So I've got 2 gallons of HCl in there, 25 boards, and 212 grams of neatly cut fingers. I'm now going to add 100 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide just to kickstart it. I've got that measured out here, and let's get it started. Start the bubblers, and then we'll close it up. The bubbler's going nicely. I'm going to add another gallon tomorrow, and then I'm just going to put this lid on to prevent splashing, and then we'll see you guys in about a week. Thanks for watching. Welcome back, viewers. Well, I lied. I said I'd be back in a week. I'm actually back 4 days later, not a full week. Yesterday, when I was adding my 3rd gallon of hydrochloric acid to my AP solution, I noticed my air bubbler quit. It's a year old. It gave up the ghost. So today I'm going to install a new air bubbler. I'll show you how I do it. You can actually see the foils are starting to come off, even without the agitation from the air. So I'm just going to put a new air bubbler on top, and then we'll call it a day. Voila! The new air bubbler is ready to go. It's a 2-port air bubbler. I have 2 outputs. 1/4-inch tubing, goes to 2, I guess they're PVC plastic tubes. I like having 2 so I can put them on each side of the acid peroxide. And this should last about a year the way I've been going through these things. It cost me $12. I'm just going to make sure these connections here are tight. Obviously, we have a guy sneaking off. And then we're going to put it in. So, the new bubbler is in. I'm resting it on the lid of the stock pot orange. AP solution, which will soon be copper chloride 2, is in the white bucket. I've got 2 feeds from my air bubbling, which is oxidizing the copper. And you can see I've already got some gold flakes floating around after 96 hours with no bubbler. So now I'm expecting this thing to pick up fast now that I have the oxidizing process going even faster. So we'll check back in 3 or 4 days and we'll see what the boards and the fingers look like. Welcome back, viewers. Today we start collecting the gold foils that have been dislodged from the circuit boards and from the fingers. If the plating is thick, it will come off as gold flakes. If the plating is real thin, it will come off as a brown powder, which will settle at the bottom of the acid peroxide bucket. So I shut off the bubblers, and I use this nice little hook that I took from my wife's backyard, and I'm starting the draining of the fingers. So the first thing I do is I just drain the fingers, 10-15 minutes, and then I will bring them over carefully and responsibly and safely with the pan underneath it to my dislodge station, which is here. I will put that glass Pyrex dish underneath the pool strainer with the fingers just to drain further. I will hold the fingers over this bucket with a little bit of water, and I will spray them with regular tap water to dislodge the fingers. If I can fully depopulate the boards of gold, I throw the scrap boards in here. If there's still some clingers or hang-oners, I will take what I can get off easily. I'll even use a little scraper there. If they're still obstinate and they refuse to come off the board, I'll put them back in here, and then eventually they will go back in the acid peroxide bucket. All right, so let's get started. I actually find this next phase quite satisfying as I collect the foils in this secondary holding bucket. I'm going to pick up each finger one at a time, spray it with regular water, knock them off into this new bucket. Any of the fingers that are completely void of gold go in here and they will be disposed of. If they still have remnant gold, they go in here and then they go back in the acid peroxide bucket tonight. So once again, I'm going to start the process of removing the gold foils from the edge connector, and any one of those edge connectors that are completely void of gold will go in this cardboard box and thrown away. Any edge connectors that still have gold on it will go in the pool strainer, which will go back in the AP bucket for another week. And then, of course, all the goody gold, shiny little guys will collect in there. So I'm going to show you how we do a few of these, and then I'm going to shut the camera down and then revisit it. This next step is somewhat tedious. I happen to enjoy it. The weather's fine, and I'm just going to get it done. I'm holding the finger deep in the bucket so I don't contribute the gold to the earth. I want to keep it. I don't want it to go back to the earth. So naturally, I'm keeping it nice and low. This one cleaned up beautifully, except for one. Maybe we can just scratch him off. He's trouble. Do we want him? We'll snap him off and put him in the bucket. So this one is clearly clean. It's gone. It goes in the box. Next one, you can actually see they're floating sideways, which means they really want to go into my collection. You just spray it and they come right off. I've noticed that on different boards, the copper, nickel underneath the gold might be a little more obstinate. Some boards come off, the gold comes off very easily. Some boards take about 2 weeks to get the gold off. So here, this guy gave up half his gold, or a third of its gold. He has to go back in the pool strainer. And then I'll occasionally get gold on my gloves. I will just spray that down and get that in the bucket. This next one here, most of it should come off. You can see that. It's kind of rewarding if you have nothing to do. And I've done some calculations on these gold fingers from telecom boards in the 70s and 80s, that this gold, the gold foils, is about 77% pure gold and 23% something else, other metals. So that's going to be a good metric once I weigh these gold foils. And that one is completely bare. So he goes in the discard box. So just a little bit of disappointing news. A lot of these foils are not being dislodged from the board. And that's probably because my bubbler quit midweek. And I just made the acid peroxide batch. And it does take time to turn into Cupric Chloride 2. So I am having some success. And it's only because they weren't sitting in there long enough. I did want to show that a couple of things. When I'm spraying, I keep my hands deep in the bucket so that all of the foils fall in the bucket. And the other thing is some of these boards that I have really thick gold plating, and they come off in sheets on my hand as opposed to just individual fingers that come off of the boards. So you can see this one really isn't giving up the gold, not that easily. So he's going to have to sit in the bath for another week. Some of them give it up partially, like this corner came off, but the rest of the sheet has not. So another week, they'll come off very easily. So we got some mixed results on Saturday morning here. Of the 212 grams of gold-plated fingers, those are the foils that came off easily. And of course, there's more foils in my acid peroxide bucket, which I will not even touch for the next few weeks. Over here are the few boards that completely gave up all the gold foils. And over here is basically 95% of the gold-plated fingers that need to go back in the acid peroxide. As I said a moment ago, the reason why it took a while was because my bubbler quit midweek, and then I just made a brand new batch of AP, so it takes time to turn into Cupric Chloride 2. And also, you can see that some fingers only partially dissolve off the board or get removed from the board. And there's a number of reasons for that. It could be just the way they're laying against each other in there. That's why it's important to dunk it and swish it around throughout the week. So that's the fingers. Now we'll look at the boards. There are 25 boards in the bucket. Let's see how we did there. But I suspect the same outcome. So 6 days ago, I put 25 highly plated gold circuit boards in the AP along with the fingers. And the same result. The gold was not dislodged at all. However, the solder mask has been deteriorated. So what I did was I just took a scraper and I scraped off the solder mask. These are 5 boards here. You can see the thick gold plating. This is just flaking right off. So now the AP, or the Cupric Chloride 2, is going to attack the gold. These will come off in nice sheets. You can actually see some of it is coming off. It gets all over the place, this darn gold. So the key is to not lose it, of course, and give it back to the earth. But you can see I scraped it with a chisel. And this solder mask now is being degraded so that the acid peroxide can get under the gold and do its thing. So the system I use here with the boards is I take the gold-plated circuit boards out of the AP and I put them in my gold collection container with a little bit of water. and I just get some of the extra AP off of the boards. Now while that's soaking, I come over to my AP solution, soon to be copper chloride 2, and I hang the next set of boards up and on this hook so they drain. And it's adjustable so I can line it right up with the acid peroxide. You can see, as soon as I stabilize this, you can see some of the gold floating around in there, and there's actually some thick foils that's coming off the big circuit boards. Of course they're going to settle to the bottom, which I will collect probably in 4 to 6 weeks. So here are my results after 6 days in AP. Once again, I need to state that my bubbler failed in the middle of the week, and I just made a new batch of AP, which takes some time to become copper chloride 2. Nonetheless, most of the gold-plated fingers are back in the pool strainer, going back in the acid peroxide today. As far as the fingers are concerned, I had a handful that were completely eliminated and void of foils. I had some that are partial, and then I have some that weren't even attacked by the solution. As far as the boards, I had 25 boards go in there, and I've had pretty good results. 6 of the boards here are completely void of gold, completely gone. These can get thrown out. Of the remaining 19, I have 3 different stages. Some basically clear of gold, some attacked but not completed, and then some really not attacked at all. And that depends on how the boards are laying, if they're laying next to each other. But you can see the copper chloride 2 is working, so I'm going to put 19 boards and this batch of fingers back in the AP. I'm going to let it bubble for about a week, and then it's going to be super, super easy. What I really enjoy is when the gold comes off of these boards, they come off in sheets. Now, on the thinner plating, which are not shown here, it comes off and rests at the bottom of the bucket in a fine brown or black powder. That's gold. You don't want to throw that out. And when we get to that stage, I will show you that in my filters. But for now, we've completely eliminated 6 boards, and we're etching through the solder mask and getting underneath the gold, and we are liberating foils. And here is the remaining boards that are going back in the bucket. This is today's catch. It doesn't look like much. That's only because there's not much in there. But it's settling down, and I'm going to put that off to the side. And then finally, in the acid peroxide bucket, which in the end should have the most foils in it, I'm thinking 4 to 6 weeks. This guy's ready to roll. See you in 7 days. So I'm pretty darn excited. 4 days later, it looks like the acid peroxide has become copper chloride 2, and I have outstanding, spectacular results. I'm just draining, looks like 10 boards there, and the copper chloride 2 is working beautifully. All of the gold plating is stripping off the fingers and the boards. And by the way, this particular copper chloride 2 bucket contains 3 gallons of muriatic acid and 200 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide. I did add another 100 milliliters of peroxide when I added the 3rd gallon of muriatic acid. So this formula, this proportion of 3 gallons HCl to 200 milliliters of H2O2 and 2 bubblers seem to be optimal for me. It takes time, it takes about a week, but now we're ready to roll with the other 105 circuit boards. And here is a snapshot of the fingers. They were stubborn last week and they're not so stubborn now. This guy here, they will just slide right off the board. And there they are. All of these fingers will be liberated from the board right now with some wash bottles. and they'll go into this holding tank until all 130 boards and 212 grams of fingers are completed. So round one is over. Score 1 for AU79, score 0 for neatly cut gold fingers. As you can see, the gold foils were liberated from the fingers. They came off smooth like butter. I will go through them one more time to make sure there's no gold I missed. They've melted literally not melted, but they melted right off the fiberglass board. And some of them are in my catch bucket, but the majority of them are in the AP bucket, which is now Cupric Chloride. Now we're going to go after the big circuit boards. These are all spent and they will be discarded. And on a side note, I'm wearing double gloves, 6 mil thick nitrile 2 gloves. In case one gets cut by the circuit board, it doesn't leave my skin exposed. I do reach my hands in this bucket here because this solution is a very diluted Cupric Chloride, and I'm safe doing that. It's very diluted, and I have double gloves, but I'm still very careful that none of it gets underneath the wrist and gloves into my skin. Pretty safe, just got to be on your best game. Okay, 35 more boards in. $35 more boards in and a double bubbler. Okay, the next batch of boards are in. First batch out, 35 more boards in. Double bubbler going. Here are the dead soldiers. 140 gold-plated boards and 212 grams of fingers have given up their gold through the kindness of their heart, and this is what remains. If you look closely, you'll probably find several flakes of gold still adhering to the printed circuit boards. I don't particularly chase molecules of gold. It just simply isn't worth my time. Filtering the rinse bucket first. Filtering the filters. Filtering the AP bucket. Today, we are going to filter the acid peroxide bucket, which should contain the majority of the gold foils that were liberated from 100 plus circuit boards and 212 grams of closely cut fingers. The process remains the same as the rinse bucket. We put the filter in the strainer, we wet it, and we simply start transferring the fluid from one bucket to another. I will do this transfer numerous times until the acid peroxide bucket is nearly drained. The new bucket will contain my acid peroxide for next season. It is good acid peroxide and can be used over and over again until the concentration of dissolved copper is too high. Please note that the brown stains on the filter is probably very fine gold powder. It will not be discarded, but it will be processed separately at a later date. Once the filter gets clogged, I will transfer it to a third bucket and save them for later. It appears the first filter is now somewhat clogged with very fine gold powder. I'm going to transfer that to a holding bucket and repeat. I'll be transferring approximately 3 gallons of AP from one bucket to another in this video. I won't show it all. I will just show you the bottom of the original AP bucket, which will contain the majority of the gold foils. I've got roughly 2 gallons of AP transferred through the filter into the secondary bucket. And you can see the gold foils are starting to become present as I go deeper and deeper into the AP bucket. The filtering process is going to get slower now as the filters clog up sooner. And as a side note, I did let my AP bucket settle with no bubbler for 48 hours before I did the filtering, so that all of the gold settles to the bottom. The actual acid peroxide bucket has been fully drained and is filtering. I'm actually surprised there wasn't more gold foils on the bottom of the acid peroxide bucket. It appears that the majority of the gold foils are in the rinse bucket, which is the bucket created as I'm squirting boards down to remove any residual foils. So that is the AP bucket, empty. This is the last filter of the AP bucket. It is beautiful, and there are definitely some gold foils in these filters. So we're going to process those and clean it up, and we'll take some actual measurements. Here is a zoom of the foils. It's hard to predict how much is in there, but it is always a beautiful sight. If you made it through this entire video, I thank you very much, and you certainly deserve a gold star, 99.9% pure, of course. Thanks for watching.